Okay, so here we are. We're welcoming back Randall Wilkinson from. We're just gonna call it Breadbot. I know it's the Wilkinson company. And then there's a little change from your program. This is Felipe Cadavid. Sorry, Cadavid. He is with Kiwi, same company, different Felipe. So, but we're happy to have you. Thank you both for being here. So, we're gonna do a little news here first. I believe this is the first time that this is being spoken about publicly and in a broad sort of way, is my understanding. But Kiwi is expanding, right? So Kiwi, you're at Kiwi campus being the operative word here, and you have started expanding. Tell us what your expansion is.
Yeah, so currently we operate in Berkeley City only, but we are expanding to 10 or 50 different campuses by the end of the month. So we're going to be around California and New York, Texas, and other different college campuses.
Yes, so that's sort of the basis for my question. So basically they're expanding from 1 to 15 campuses. You'll notice, I don't know if Starship is here anymore, but there's sort of this battle brewing on college campuses over delivery bots. I shouldn't say, battle, but like Starship's at George Mason and Northern Arizona. Kiwi now is at Berkeley, and then these 15 others, including Harvard and UC Davis.
Yeah,
right?
Harvard, MIT, Stanford, UC Davis, UCSF.
First thing I want to talk about is just sort of how those programs are run, because this gets into the society part, right? So we talk a lot about robots replacing humans and taking away jobs, but students are actually fundamental to this expansion. Can you talk a little bit about the program that students are, doing with the Kiwi bot?
Definitely. They need to take care of the robots, so they are learning about batteries, maintenance, repairs, operations, management, taking care of high-tech, very innovative machines, so they can easily get a job later on based on the experience they had with taking care of these robots.
So you're not just deploying these robots off to campuses. Students will actually be taking care of them.
Definitely. We don't send people from our team to the universities. The students are on their own. We just send them a manual, some spare batteries, toolkits, so like basic repair tools, and that's it. If they need a specialized tool, we just send them the map of 3D, and they have to print them on their own and 3D print them if something major happens. That's it.
Interesting. So I want to move over to the Breadbot real quick. So you've built theatricality into the Breadbot, right? So people walk in, they can see their loaf being made. It's exciting. It's new. It's fun. So the customer is really happy to see it. But what do bakers think of it? What do grocery stores think of it? Are there people? Is it a lot of disgruntled people? They're like, oh, now I don't get to bake bread anymore? Or how do you see how are you integrating with store personnel?
So one of the things that is happening on the large scale in the whole grocery trade is this debate, this battle, this question of what is the future of grocery. Is it all home delivery and the brick and mortar store will be gone? Or is there a balance somehow between these? And so what you find in our conversations with the retailers is that a very big part of what they see coming, and the more creative ones that we talk to are saying, look, there's no question that delivery and click and pick it up is part of the future, but we need to recognize that people want to interact with their food. There is reason to come to the grocery store. There is something that they get from coming here. And as those retailers see it, the Breadbot is a part of this process of engaging people and giving them a reason to come to the store. And what we see as we observe people interacting with the Breadbot is that instead of it being food that sort of magically appeared from somewhere and it's on this shelf and they pick it up and take it home, there is a little bit of the experience of mom's or grandma's home-baked bread and this experience of being part of the production, being able to identify and engage in a meaningful but small way with that production. There's the story told of back when cake mix first came on the scene. They had figured out, okay, if we put these things together in a box, someone has to do is to add water at home, put it in the oven, and they have the cake. And when they introduced that, they had sales. But someone said, I think that we have gone too far, and the person making the cake doesn't feel that this is really them participating in it. And what they did was they pulled the egg back out of the cake mix, and the consumer had to break the egg, put it into the mix, and make it. Sales skyrocketed. We think that this engagement in the food, children understanding what their food is, the taking the loaf, putting it into the automated slicer, choosing do you want thin, medium, or thick, that having a small but meaningful participation in the bread process is significant and becomes a part of the warp and the weave of life. And so we're getting that as we see the interaction with our Breadbot.
Gotcha. Could we power down Kiwi? She's he or she, she's buzzing a little bit, so it's yeah. Or just send it on its way. There we go. Oh, goodbye, Kiwi. So that's funny. As you went to power it off, it blinked, right? So you just winked at me. That's a nice little touch. But that's actually integral to how you were getting people to accept robots, right? Which is you designed it from the ground up to be cute, so no one would want to mess with it, harm it, do whatever. Can you talk a little bit about the design choices you made in creating your robot so that people wouldn't... You're in Berkeley, right? Which can be hostile to certain forms of automation. What design elements did you put into it to decrease that?
We chose round elements throughout the design of the robot to make it less pointy or harmful, less engineering, and more design friendly. We wanted to make it as cute as we could possibly do it. And the screen was a great element that we introduced in the second generation design to convey emotion, so that people will think that the robot has like a soul, has some kind of cuteness or some sort of connection. We say that if you paddle about 3 times, you get above the curve, and that was very appealing to Berkeley students. They even got like a vigil for when one robot died. They put candlelight and all like that. Is like how we show the connection to people.
Okay, so on Breadbot, what are you hearing from grocery stores? So your object is to put Breadbot in places where it can just it can crank out fresh bread all day long, right? Are the bakers' unions of America, are they rising up and storming your gates with pitchforks, or what's happening? Is there more like, I don't have to wake up at 4:30, or are those jobs being moved into something else? What are you noticing from the grocers or people that you're talking with as you start to roll this out?
Well, bread in a grocery store is kind of a schizophrenic event in that the bakery is not where most bread is sold. Most of the bread is in the center of the store, having come from a central factory and put on the shelves as a consumer packaged good. And so the bakery personnel really didn't have anything to do with that. So when we come into the store, the bakery is actually increasing the activities and the relevance to the consumer, which bakery staff tend to like. Secondly, it doesn't take a lot of labor, but it generates a lot of it generates attraction to the bakery and attracts people to see the other things in the bakery that they may have walked past, and therefore gives them more activity and more engagement, more involvement. So it hasn't created a backlash in terms of our experience with people feeling like we're taking away jobs. And in fact, if you look at the amount of labor at the central factory, which is highly automated and mass scale, the amount of labor per loaf in the factory is probably on an order of magnitude similarity to the amount of labor per loaf in the store. So in terms of a net reduction, that had already happened decades ago. So in our case, we're not getting a lot of feedback in terms of negativity on that.
Okay. On the Kiwi front, so what's interesting to me is these student-run, as you expand to these universities, you get students to run it, which is A, kudos to you, get students to do it. Yeah. But B, also, you are training an entire generation to just come to rely on robots, to expect them to. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I just mean like they're getting used to the technology. They're getting used to be able to dial up something and have a little robot come and visit it. Are you seeing, I guess my question is, is there a generational difference in terms of who's accepting robots and what they're using them for?
Today, every day you interact with robots, so just that you don't sometimes perceive them as robots. Wind wipers in your car for when the rain goes, those are robots that are autonomous. Doors that open by themselves, those are robots. This is just a robot that did something that wasn't previously done because of new technology. Previously we had injection engine, now we have batteries that can do that. So as generation of technology goes forward, you get different robots, and you have all been inclined with robots throughout your life. In the next generation, we will see different robots that fly, even more heavier things, and we all have to know that this is going to happen.
So it's just inevitable.
No, it's just a better world, and we need to know how robots can interact in the way that we feel comfortable with. That's why our robots don't fly. We just do ground, which is safe and easy.
Sure, yeah, I would. That buzzing over my head would probably give me a little bit of pause on my way to class. Randy, one of your customers that you're looking at, and I don't think a lot of people think about this, is the military, right? You don't necessarily associate the military with bread, but if you take a step back, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like it's automating a task that they could probably that's useful in automating on a ship. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the military has come to you talking about and what they're looking for? And how that might play a role in sort of your go-to-market.
Sure. The current way that bread on board ship is provided is that prior to leaving port, the ship stocks up with manufactured from the central factory and frozen loaves that are loaded on the ship in freezers, and then as the ship is at sea, those are gradually taken from storage, thawed, and served to the sailors. The problem is that when those ships are at sea for a significant period of time, the restocking becomes a challenge. The inefficient use of space and the inefficient use of energy on board the ship, the freezers that need the care that aren't storing other things that might be more efficiently stored, all became an issue for the Navy. And as they looked at battle readiness and they said, look, Navy needs to shift their practice from this approach to actually baking on board ship. And the Navy began looking at who's going to bake the bread on board ship. We don't have bakers who are trained bakers, and we take a 19-year-old and train them to become a baker, poor everybody else on board ship having to eat the bread that they put out. And so it was a dilemma for the Navy. How are they going to do that? And they were quite thrilled to find that here's an automated solution. And so one of our first customers is their initial delivery beginning to look at how is this going to fit into that context. But the similar kind of thing, the research center that's doing that does it for all four branches of the military. And they also do field kitchens, which are in the shipping containers, standardized shipping containers, where they can helicopter in or trailer in a 20-foot unit, and half an hour from arrival, they've got a whole field kitchen that can serve 800 people in service. They're looking at taking the Breadbot, putting it into a pod like that, and having the ability to have a full-scale bakery going within a short period of time of setting up. That same thing used by FEMA for a disaster can provide quality food to the people who need the energy and the nutrition in the context of whether it's a disaster or a refugee crisis or whatever. So there are a lot of applications that are enabled by this kind of technology.
I didn't even think of the FEMA angle, but that's right. If you can set up a machine and just have that going all the time, then people are freed up to do other more important tasks than baking
in
bread.
an emergency
in an
situation.
Emergency situation. Felipe, there's a phone number on the back of the Kiwi bot, and that goes to your boss. That's your boss's personal phone number, right?
Yes.
Yes. What?
No.
Yeah. Well, last time I checked, last story I wrote about it. It was like that's his number, and it's like, how's my driving? And it's his number. And I'm just wondering, do you know what kinds of calls you're getting from people? Are they getting like a hey, nice driving, or are they getting like a, I hate you and your robots, get them out of Berkeley, you're ruining the planet, or what kinds of calls are you getting from people?
Oh, we have a very good technical customer support, and we haven't had any accident in the 2 years operation. Over 30,000 deliveries that we've had in Berkeley, not a single accident.
Well, you had one.
Not with people.
Not with people, but there was.
They crash down. They sometimes malfunction. It's what happens to cars, robots, any other appliance.
Right. Immolate, catch fire.
Yeah, that happens to cell phone companies, like any other ion battery operated.
That's a lead into just sort of when you're going out to these campuses and talking to them, what are their concerns about employing robots or having robots in the way that they interact with people? Do they have a kind of a standard checklist of like, you need to have all of these things, or what are they saying you need to have before you can set foot or wheel on their campus?
That depends on different campuses. Some campuses want our robot to be on their campus so that they are on top of innovation, technology, convenience for students. Some say it's safer to have a little robot around campus than some dude that we don't know in a bike wandering around. That's sort of thing.
Okay. And then are there things like you need to have this many sensors, or you need to have this type of sensor, or you need to go at this particular speed?
No, we modify a robot so that it goes according to a speed that's comfortable to people to walk by. So we take a lot into the community aspect and having a close relationship with the community that we are in, so that if they feel safe with the robot driving by their side, they know that it's safe to walk by the robot and the robot is not going to crash into them or do anything sudden. That is the approach we want to take.
Okay. For Breadbot, and I'll open it up to questions here in just a second. So Breadbot goes into a store. What is have you had a chance to talk about how stores or wherever you're putting them will introduce Breadbot to the rest of the workers there? We talked about this earlier with Albertsons, right? Like you had self-checkout. So that's, the grocery industry is used to a certain level of automation. But does the presence of a robot that just sits and makes bread all day, is there a way that they're rolling it out to people, or is it just like, hey, here's Breadbot and it's all gravy?
Well, to be honest, we're early in that process. We've been in 3 different stores. We're just now starting pilot tests at some of the major retailers. So we're talking through that very issue. What we are doing is setting up an educational system, largely video dependent for their staff, so that they can anticipate and understand before it arrives, okay, this is comfortable, this I understand. And then it's mostly, our experience to date has been sort of the one-on-one training on how to operate the equipment. But in terms of the complexity of introducing it, it's actually a fairly simple process. It's not been a difficult one, and to date, we're not having social issues, shall we say, in that process.
Okay. So one of the things in talking with Kiwi before, like Kiwi's goal is to have so many delivery bots around that it brings down the cost of food and delivery. Sort of, what do you see? Have you noticed a good? What have been the reactions of like restaurants that you've talked with, in terms of employing robots and having the robot interact with their customers? Have you had any issues or anything that they've brought up on that end?
They like that the restaurant brings that experience, which is what people ultimately like. Having that kind of experience and convenience is something positive, other than having any traditional methods of delivery. In markets like the Bay Area, delivery is so expensive. We started out with a burrito that we ordered, and it was like $8 burrito, and the delivery was also $8. So we say, hey, this is not good. $16 for a burrito, it's just something that it will not be good. So we now notice that most of the cost is in the delivery person per hour. With robots, we see it as a tool. So one delivery person can do in 1 hour 14 deliveries, whereas a traditional method, they can only do 2. That is where the delivery costs go down. That's where restaurants get more deliveries, get more revenue, get more money, and people get their food at a fair price.
Okay. Back to Breadbot. So bread is something, I think if you talk to most people, they consider it like the word we used earlier was like artisanal, right? Like it's handcrafted. People get very spiritual about bread and the process that it takes and the care and the fragility of it all. So can the robot are you trying to have the robot replicate that, or are you trying to create a different experience altogether?
First of all, nobody loves a great artisanal boule loaf of bread more than I do. I don't want to replace that experience, but when that experience is a $9 loaf, it makes it difficult for mass production and experience. So what we're trying to do is to, first of all, free up that artisan from doing the routine and creating that less expensive loaf that people can have as their standard fare, and that those who aren't rich enough to afford that $9 loaf can have great fresh bread continuously. So that large-scale production is something that we think we add a lot to by delivering the fresh, the environmentally friendly, all of the good things that come with it, and free up the artisan to make the really exceptional loaves that we don't pretend to make. But I think there's another piece to that as well, and that is when you think of what it is that I want in that bread experience, sure, I am wanting to support the artisan and that artisanal thing, but at its root, it's really about the bread itself. And what we associate with the artisan is the use of natural grains, the use of no preservatives, the really good stuff, but it's really almost about the artisanal nature of the sourcing, the nutrition, and the bread experience we're getting. We're actually delivering that. Now, we don't claim to be artisanal, but what people hunger for is good bread with good sourcing and good stuff. And that, I think, we're actually delivering on. So we coexist with true artisanal products, but at the same time, we're delivering what it is everybody wants, which is freshness and good source material.
Okay, so just so you know, when we were putting today together, we tried to get regulators in to talk about sort of that role in terms of the human-robot interaction. But what I want to talk about, you, to the best that you can here in the closing minutes, as robots come into our society and do jobs and automate certain jobs, where does the responsibility fall in terms of making sure that people who are displaced have a sort of a soft landing? Is that incumbent on the companies employing the robots? Is that incumbent on the governments? Is that incumbent on the companies doing the displacing? Do you guys have any thoughts on that in terms of broad societal change? Because it's coming, right? Like, I think today has shown that it's coming. Where should we look to leadership to kind of help resolve the issue that is on its way?
Actually, we see these robots as a tool, so that when it's harsh winter and you have to do deliveries because you are a student that is on a budget, like many of us were, if you want to do deliveries, you just go, load the robot goes and waits outside for the customer to pick it up. Sometimes even 5 minutes. How many times have you just, 5 minutes, I'll go down and pick it up? Those 5 minutes in the cold, outside, waiting for someone to pick up the food, that is something that we don't want for a person. And with this tool, that same person that is doing deliveries can do more deliveries, get back to the restaurant, pick up more food, load more robots, and make more people happy having their lunch at the time they want.
Okay.
In our case, the genesis of the idea for the Breadbot was actually a young man who was working in a bakery at a natural food store that had to get up 3 or 4 in the morning every morning, telling his dad, who was a Boeing engineer, look, this sucks. You've got to get people like me a better life by inventing this. And that's the genesis of it. So I think that on the one hand, there are some of these that are not actually displacing, which happens to be us. But the issue that you raise, I think, is a very relevant one, and what is going to happen. As to, do I personally or do we as a company think that's the role of government, the role of us as a company to look to solve that? I think that process is too foggy for us at this point to forecast exactly how this is going to happen. I think that it's probably like many things. I was having a conversation just a few minutes ago where what happens when robots are making robots such that robots are everywhere and doing everything for us. What does that look like when there's really nothing for us to do except be? I think, was it WALL-E or the movie where that was provided? And I think that my expectation is ultimately that there will be freedom to do more creative things that we don't yet really forecast and imagine, but that potentially it's going to be a mixed blessing, not unlike alcohol, where the wine for most is a great thing, but there are those for whom wine or alcohol is actually their demise. The absence of work may free many people up to good things, but I think it may be something where without that focus and purpose in life, it's going to be a negative for some. I don't pretend to have the answer to how that will best be addressed at this point. To me, it's, like I say, I don't see it quite clearly in the fog yet. I don't think any of us do. So I don't have an answer, I guess, is the bottom line to that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That is our time. Please thank our panel here real quick. Thank you.